Hi, I'm Susan. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and you are watching Mad Knitting. This channel is all about the stuff that I make. Most of the time that is knitting and my thoughts about my crafting life. You can find me on Instagram as madtown_mama. I am also on Ravelry and Bluesky as madtownmama. Today is May 8, 2025. I live in Madison, Wisconsin with my family, and this is a glorious time of year. We are having beautiful spring weather, maybe a little warmer than it should be, but it's very sunny outside, and it actually feels like a little bit of a crime that I am sitting here talking to you instead of pulling weeds or moving dirt or some of those other things that I have been doing over the last week or so in my yard. So today I have to share with you a couple of finished objects, a couple of works in progress, some sewing, and hopefully there will be time at the end for some books that I'm reading or have been reading. I'm not wearing anything hand knit today because it's warm enough that I don't need to. So we'll just move right into the projects. My first finished object is a pair of socks. I showed these before. There was a beautiful sunny Sunday, it might have been Easter, when I actually had a little bit of a breather from my normal obligations. I work full-time from home for a nonprofit, and sometimes I have to travel for work, but when I'm not traveling, I'm working in my, like a home office situation. And I'm also a professional musician, so I do that as opportunities come up, and it's been a busy season. So a few weeks ago, when I actually had a chance to just sit outside in the sun on the first real warm day that we had, I cast on 2 pairs of socks, like basically all at once. And the first pair is finished. I think these are so nice. These are a gift. They're for somebody that I have worked with who is moving to another state this summer. So I wanted to give them a going away, parting gift. And I've noticed that they like a lot of different colors, but I've noticed that they seem to particularly like purple and tend to wear a lot of muted colors. So I went through my sock stash and I found this skein. It's by a dyer who's no longer in business. That was Artistic Lilly. And this is the color Vintage Easter in, I forget what she called her sock base, but it's a 80-20 blend of superwash merino nylon. So it's like a kind of a smoky lavender main color with streaks of dark purple and gold and a little bit of brighter color here and there, which I quite like. So as far as the design goes, this is run-of-the-mill, pretty much my usual. The reason these got done in a couple of weeks is because, socks are the perfect thing for me to take along with me to concerts, meetings, wherever I'm sitting around and need to keep my hands busy but don't want to follow instructions. So I did a 72 stitch cast on with a size 1 needle, 1x1 rib cuff, plain stockinette, as you can see, for the rest of the leg and the foot. And there's an eye of partridge heel here with a little bit of a garter edge along the heel flap. So this is how I do pretty much all of my socks. The cast on numbers may vary a little bit depending on the final size that I'm hoping to get, but I do a lot of my socks this way. These are made to fit like a men's size shoe 8 or 9 or so. I have to kind of take my best guess and hope that they fit. I know that on my feet they're a little bit big and a little bit loose, so I'm hoping that they fit this person just right. So that's the first finished object to show you. My second finished object is, oh, I just noticed I have more ends to hide. I'm still calling it done. This is called the Simply Curious shawl. It's a pattern by Helen Stewart, also known as Curious Handmade. And I am quite pleased with how it turned out. You know what, I haven't even tried it on yet, so maybe I'll like model it for you. This is how I wear shawls. I like when they're kind of long and not too wide so that I can wear them like a scarf. So usually I do this. Sometimes I might do the thing where you like make a loop and stick the ends through. But you know what, I just noticed this actually goes with the t-shirt I'm wearing. So maybe I'll just keep it on. Like I said, the pattern is called the Simply Curious shawl. It's written for DK weight yarn using a size 8 needle. I actually have the needle. I used this kind. Forget the brand. I think it's called a Mindful Connect collection, and this needle says Exhale on it, which I think that's a little cheesy. Like, this is just a knitting needle. I don't need my needles to remind me to breathe, but I did enjoy the experience of knitting with them. And it's a size 8, which is what, 5 millimeters, I guess? Anyway, yeah, 5 millimeters. It's a really straightforward pattern. I've talked about this before, but Helen Stewart has a system of pattern writing where she gives you line by line instructions. If it's appropriate to have a chart, she will have a chart too. It wasn't for this because there's nothing to chart. It's just like a row with yarn overs every once in a while. But she gives you row by row instructions so you can check off each one as you go. And every so often she'll include a percentage. So when you've reached 5%, 10%, 20%, etc. of your yarn, you can see how far you've gone, which is very motivating. And also, if you aren't sure if you're going to have enough for the project, you can always weigh it beforehand and keep checking in as you do the project to see if you're going to have enough to finish, which is very cool. That wasn't an issue with this. I actually have a little bit of the yarn left over, but it's really good, like truly mindless knitting. I mean, you can tell that this pattern was not very complicated or involved. There were increases. This garter stitch, there are increases, and every so often there would be yarn overs, which made it interesting, you know, just enough to sort of keep you going. Like, I'll just get through the next yarn over section and the next yarn over section. But I wasn't even really paying attention to that, to what was repeating in the pattern. I was just checking off each row as I went. And it was very satisfying. So this wasn't a good take-along project because I didn't want to have to deal with the pattern, but I basically got it done in Zoom meetings, which I spend a lot of time in Zoom meetings, for better or for worse. It's fatiguing, but I also get a lot of knitting done. So anyway, a little good, a little bad. So I started, the yarn, which I'll show you the label in a bit, is a mix of cotton and wool. And it's a slow color changing situation. So it started off with this deep green color, moving towards a more teal blue, and eventually getting towards a more pale blue. I really like how this turned out. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to keep it. I had thought I might give it away, but now that I've tried it on, I'm like, oh, I really like this. So jury's out. The yarn is kind of an odd one. It's called Shades of Merino Cotton, Feinste Merino Wolle mit Baumwolle, I guess is how you say it in German. It's from Lana Grossa, and it's a 50-50 blend of cotton and wool. This was a really big skein. It's 200 grams and it's got about 760 meters. So I don't know, that's probably about a sport weight, I guess. Maybe a lighter sport weight. This is what's left, and I kind of wish that I had just kept going and used up the whole skein, because I'm not really sure what I would do with this amount. I haven't weighed it, but you know, I probably could have gotten about this much yet. But what's odd about this is that you can probably see here that it's not really plied. There are four strings of yarn? 4 strings of yarn that just sort of lay parallel to each other to create the yarn. So when you're knitting with it, it's really easy to split or get your needle in between these. Like, I wouldn't even call them plies. Like, each of these is plied together, but it's really easy to get your needle stuck in between those strings. So split stitches were just a little bit of an issue. Not enough to bother me in a pattern like this that is so straightforward. But if I was doing something with a lot of different lace patterning, you know, where you have to do a lot of yarn overs and increases and decreases, or shaping like for a garment, I think I would have been less comfortable with it. So something to keep in mind. I actually have another skein of this same yarn in more of a rainbow gradient, and I will probably just make another shawl exactly like this because I like how it turned out. And I think the only difference is that I would make it a little bigger so I can use up the whole skein. So that's the deal with this. The other thing with this yarn is that occasionally there were knots in one of the strings, and I think that might have had to do with the color changes. So it looks to me like the way they handle the color changes is that, you know, they'll change out one strand at a time. So maybe at the beginning there were 4 strands of this teal green, and then at some point one of those strands was knotted in to be blue, and then 2 of them were blue, then 3 of them were blue, and it's just like kind of gradually goes like that. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, I'm very happy with how this turned out. I think it's cute. And because it's half cotton, it's not as warm as a whole wool scarf or shawl. So this will be really good for Wisconsin late spring, early fall, when it's not really cold, but sometimes you might just want a little something extra around your neck. All right, that's it for finished objects. I do have 2 works in progress to show you. So back to when I went on my little cast on frenzy and cast on 2 pairs of socks on one Sunday afternoon, I'm going to show you the other pair, or the other sock that I cast on. I think I showed this in my last episode, but all I had was the cast on and maybe 1 round of ribbing, and I've made quite a lot of progress since then because I've had a lot of sitting around time to do it. So here it is. This is literally a riot of color. In fact, the yarn is from Knitcircus. I'll show you caked up. I don't think I have the label handy. This is what it looks like in the cake. This is 100% BFL fingering weight yarn from Knitcircus, which is a wonderful indie dye company based in Madison. They used to have a brick and mortar store. It is no longer open. They do all wholesale and online orders now. But I think I ordered this during a Pride sale last year. So the colorway is called The First Pride Was a Riot, referring to the Stonewall protests in, oh man, I looked this up last time. I think it was 1970. So this has all the colors plus bits of black. And it's really wild and variegated, and it's the kind of thing that you can only love in a sock. I can only love it in a sock. So for this pair, I cast on 62 stitches on size 1 needles. Got a 1x1 cuff. I continued down the leg in garter ribs, so 1 round of 1x1 ribbing, 1 round of just knitting. And that way, when I got to the heel, I just continued that column, the column of knit stitches, I continued down for the slip stitch heel part here. So yeah, I'm making these socks to fit me. I will probably keep them. A lot of my socks are wearing out, so I think I'm justified in doing that. And it's BFL. It just feels so nice. I've got 1 other pair of BFL socks from a different dyer, so I don't know. I don't think it's quite the same base. Because this is a little, it just feels different. It's not as thin as the other yarn I used. But I really like it, and given enough meetings, these socks will be done before you know it too. Just in time for the summer heat, right? Okay, my final work in progress I've showed before. but there's more of it. So I am making the A Bloom cardigan by Ann Ginger. This was published in a Making Stories magazine. I am not sure if you can get it. I had thought maybe it was only available by purchasing the entire magazine online, but I don't think it's available digitally. It might have just been a print version. So the rights have now been reverted back to the designers, but she just hasn't listed it for sale. I don't know if there's some reformatting she would have to do or what. Anyway, I've met the designer. We're buddies. Anne is amazing and is talented in so many ways. Like, she sews, she designs knitwear, she can ride horses. She's just cool. And I'm trying to see if I have a picture. I don't think I do. So I'll have to throw one in from the designer page on Ravelry. But it's a very casual cardigan, not really drop sleeve, but there's not a ton of shaping. It's knit in one piece from the bottom to the top, and then you do the sleeves separately and sew them together and sew them in. So there is some seaming with this pattern. That does not bother me. Back in the dark ages when I learned to knit, every single pattern for sweaters, it seems like, was written to be knit in pieces and then seamed together, even color work. That one doesn't make sense to me, but that's just how they did it. Elizabeth Zimmerman was kind of the only person. She was considered an outlier because she wanted to knit everything in one piece, and she had a whole system for it and a whole set of instructions for it. And magazines used to take her designs and rewrite them to be knit in pieces and seamed together, even color work. It makes like no sense, especially if you have like a round yoke design or something. I don't get it. If you're not familiar with Elizabeth Zimmerman, by the way, she's like the original knit blogger, in my opinion. Where was she born? She was from Europe, and she had to leave to escape. This is relevant now, isn't it? She had to leave to escape Nazi Germany. I think she was maybe born in Switzerland and educated in England, and then they had to flee to get away from Hitler, and ended up in Wisconsin, actually. And she had a newsletter that she sent out. I think people would send her like payments of $1 for, like, it was like the 60s and 70s. So this was, the economy back then, and the sort of the way information was exchanged was you would send her, I don't know if they would send a check or just like a couple of dollars cash, but then you would get like this typed up newsletter in the mail that had, her wonderful writing about knitting, and it had, instructions for design. And she had what she called pithy instructions, because she believed that knitters were smart enough to figure things out by themselves and understand the engineering and the construction of knitwear. It's amazing. I have all of her books. So she had these newsletters from Schoolhouse Press that would come out however often, I don't know. And she had a series on PBS. I got some DVDs from the library once and watched them, and they were absolutely delightful. Like, her cat would roam around the shop, and she was just very casual. And, it's like, I can imagine it's much like what YouTubers are doing now. Only this was much more involved, because it's not like there were smartphones and the internet and stuff like that. Wow. That was a whole digression. If you've not heard of Elizabeth Zimmerman, I mean, she is the reason so many people are empowered to write their own knitting patterns today. You may not even know it, but her legacy is the thread, I think, that continues through this day. Maybe I'll do some more research on that and talk about it some other time. That would be cool. All that to say, I grew up learning how to knit sweaters in pieces and seaming them up. So it might not be my favorite way to do it, but it doesn't intimidate me. And there are some advantages. Like, you get a little more structure, especially if there's a heavier stitch pattern like cables or something like that. And also you're not trying to do the entire sweater at once. And if you make a mistake, you don't have as much to take out. Anyway, here's a sleeve. Here's the first sleeve. The main feature of this pattern is this cool stitch, all over stitch design that's textured. From a distance, it looks a little bit like a cable. It looks like you're doing cable crosses. That's not what it is, and I won't give it away. It's more of a cluster stitch, but it's very easy to do. And I've got a whole sleeve, and see, I can tell that the sleeve is going to fit me very nicely. So here's the first sleeve. She doesn't say to start with the sleeves, but I did just to avoid getting stuck on Sleeve Island. And here's the second sleeve. I am very nearly done with the shaping at the top. I have a little more decreasing and then some, binding off stuff to round it off at the top. But here's the second sleeve. I think on my phone camera, this is coming out a little bit orange looking. It's really not. It's really a lovely dark heathered red color. The yarn I'm using, oh, well, let me say, just to say, this sweater comes in, I feel like I never remember to give information like sizes. This sweater comes in 10 sizes with a finished bust circumference ranging from 34.5 inches to 62 inches around. I am making the second size, which is 36.75 inches. Normally I would probably make the first one, but I don't want it to be too, it's a cardigan and it's meant to be a little looser. So I don't like loads of ease, but I don't want it to fit tight or look awkward. She calls for Bichet Bouche Le Petit lamb's wool, which is very similar to the yarn I am using, Brooklyn Tweed Loft, which is the same yardage. It's got 275 yards per 50 grams. This is the color Long Johns, and I love it. I love the color. The yarn feels very fragile, so I'm a little nervous about how well this sweater is gonna hold up. Brooklyn Tweed, their Loft and Shelter yarns especially, I feel like people have they either love it or hate it. It is very light. It is, very woolly, which I know is sort of a funny word to use because it's wool. Why wouldn't it be woolly? But it is very fragile. Like you barely have to tug it for it to break. So I'm hoping that when it's knit up and all that, it'll be okay. I guess we'll find out. I've had this in my stash for a while, so I wanted to use it. According to, I have 6 skeins, which is about 1,600 yards, right? A little over 1,600. 275 times 6 is 1,200 plus. Oh dear, maybe it's just, sorry, yeah, it's a little over 1,600 yards, 1,650. I was just doing the math in my head, which should be enough for this. I don't know what the percentage, I was hoping that one skein would do it per sleeve, but each sleeve takes a little more than one skein, which means I'll be using a little bit more than a third of my total yardage just on the sleeves. So we'll see. And there's a little bit of a shawl collar situation. I don't intend to make it as long as the pattern calls for, so that'll help. I guess we'll see how that works out. Yeah, so those are my works in progress. I feel like I normally would have a little more to show in terms of knitting, but it's the time of year when I want to be outside all the time. I've been doing a ton of garden work. I actually made the mistake of over ordering compost. So I spent an entire weekend, like spending about 10 hours total, hauling dirt around to different parts of the garden, clearing weeds, digging up new garden areas, and I'm still not done. So that's an ongoing project. I do, however, have some sewing to share with you. The first project has already been sent off and I recorded a clip last week, so I will insert that here. This is Past Susan here to do a special sewing segment. I have finished a project that I want to go ahead and send off to the recipients, and didn't have enough to record for a whole knitting episode. So we're just going to insert this whenever the next episode drops. Today is Monday, April 28th. So yeah, blast from the past. Before I start, just so you know, what I'm wearing is, this is the Heart of Glass by Marianarella. I'm hesitating because I'm trying to remember everything. Lyrical Knits, I think, is her like business name. It is actually sleeveless, and I've just got a shirt on to keep off the chill this morning. But it's a very warm day. It's probably going to storm later. And I made this top out of 100% hemp yarn. So it's a really lovely thing to wear on warm days when I need a lot of, ventilation and don't want anything too heavy or warm. This hemp has incredible drape. I just love how it kind of flows. It's a little on the see-through side, so I should be wearing a tank top under it, but it's Monday morning and I already don't care. So I have this for coverage and modesty, and I'm not really planning to go out in public today, so there you go. All right, I have completed a sewing project that was a special request, which I do not get very often. Although, come to think of it, a year ago, I was making these aprons for my mother-in-law as a special request. You can go back and watch an old episode or two to learn about that. I will find them and link them. This wasn't quite so complicated as that. My brother, as you know, if you've been watching me for any length of time, lives in Virginia. He has 2 young daughters. One just turned 9. The other one is almost 7. And he specifically requested child size oven mitts for his older daughter. Both of those girls love to help cook in the kitchen, and I think his older daughter in particular wants to get more into baking. So they asked for oven mitts. So I thought, oh yeah, absolutely, Auntie Susu would love to oblige. So then I had to figure out how to make child-size oven mitts, because this is not something I can just pull out of my brain. So I did a quick search and almost immediately found a free pattern and online tutorial from the Made for Mermaids website. I had not encountered this maker before, but the pattern looked pretty straightforward and the tutorial was very clear. So that's what I went with. I can't speak to any of her other patterns or designs, but I thought this was a good one. So her pattern comes in 3 sizes. There's like a regular adult size oven mitt, there's child size, which is the one I used, and then like a dolly size. So you have to download the PDF just of the pattern, and then there's a tutorial on her blog. I will link both of those in the description box. So because it's free, I don't mind sharing some details about the process. But I'll go ahead and show you the mitts first, because they came out incredibly cute. Like, I am thrilled with how they came out. So here's the first set I made. They're covered in bananas. This fabric was a gift from someone. I did a gift exchange with the Yarny podcast, a couple of holiday seasons in a row. And the first time I got some fabric in my box, and this wild banana print was in there. And when I was looking through my fabric stash to find something appropriate, I thought, like, what better for kids' oven mitts than this banana print? So that's what I used for that. The bias tape is a scrap of bias tape I had left over from something else. The second pair of mitts are this very fun zebra print. Zebras on a red background. I love this color combination. And you know, the mitt almost looks like it's adult size because it sort of fits on my hand, but it's a little short for me, and the thumb is a little short. So I think it should be good for kid size. I hope it's not too big and loose on them. You know, oven mitts are, I don't know, very generally sized, right? So the zebra print was actually a 1-yard cut I found at a thrift store for a couple of dollars. I have no business buying random cuts of fabric from anywhere because I have actually quite an extensive fabric stash. And I don't sew often enough that I'm using it up very quickly. But in this case, it was kind of nice to have it and be able to just to mine my own stash and not have to go out and buy anything. Okay, so this is what they look like at the end. Let me talk you through all the supplies and then the process. So she calls for, you need fabric for the outside, obviously, and for the lining. There are also 2 layers of batting. You use a regular quilt batting, and I will show you what I had on hand. So in addition to my very extensive yarn stash and my fairly extensive fabric stash, I also have a lot of random crafting supplies. I have been a crafty person ever since I was a little kid. My mom taught me how to crochet. I don't crochet much, like at all. I don't really know how to follow crochet instructions, but my mom taught me how to crochet. Soon after I learned how to knit. I learned how to sew by hand when I was really young. Eventually took 4-H sewing for like 3 or 4 years, I think, and got fairly proficient. My mom taught me how to quilt. I learned how to cross stitch and embroider. Like, there's just all these things that I know how to do. And even if I don't do them all on a regular basis, I have a fairly comprehensive collection of supplies, which can be overwhelming in terms of the storage space and the thought of trying to use it all up. But also, since I think we're on the verge of like total economic collapse, I might be grateful to have these things to keep us warm and clothed for the next few years. Anyway, what it comes down to is I have quilt batting. So this is, I'm sure I picked this up at Joann's or something. This is a package of a crib size quilt batting, 45 by 60 inches. So I had a scrap that I used for one set of the mitts, and then I had to bust into this for the other. I also had on hand, of course I did, I had on hand Insule Bright, which is insulated, it's called insulated lining. This is basically, I'll take the wrapper off. This is basically quilt batting. Here, I have a little scrap to show you. Quilt batting that, if you can see, there's a little bit of metallic there. They've put something in there that makes it heat proof. So this is really good for use in pot holders, oven mitts, you know, like if you're making a mug rug or any kind of, anything that you want to be heat resistant. And sure enough, it was kind of interesting when I had the layers together and I was ironing them. So I'll explain that process in a bit. I actually, I had the hot iron over it, and then just to check, you know, on the top where the iron just was, it was very, very warm, and underneath it was very cool. So the heat proof stuff, really is heat proof, and it works pretty well. All right, I'll dump that on the floor. So what you do is, and I saved scraps from the zebra one just to show you. So you have the lining, the batting, the insulation, and then your main fabric all stacked up. And then what I did, you can see it on the lining side. I just used cheap muslin I had on hand. I marked lines diagonally with a friction pen. It's this pen that the ink will disappear when it gets hot. So it's very popular for people who, you know, if you're tracing a pattern on something and you don't want the lines to show, or if you're tracing a quilt pattern on fabric to stitch over, you can just, if you iron it, then the ink disappears. So it's very handy for marking fabric. So I just used a ruler and marked diagonal lines, stitched them down. That part was a little tedious, but once I got into a rhythm, it wasn't so bad. So for the zebra print, I did the lines 1 1/4 inch apart. The first pair I did was the banana mitts, and those I did 1 inch apart. And you can see, because it was done on the diagonal, that the fabric wanted to pull just a little bit. So I had to be careful when I was stitching not to let things stretch out too much or get too out of whack. I have a sewing machine with a walking foot, which I don't know exactly how the mechanism works, but it helps keep the layers of fabric from slipping around too much when it is going through the machine. And that really helps when you're quilting. It doesn't absolutely solve every problem. Like if you have a really huge piece, things will still kind of shift and get out of place and sort of pucker in funny ways. But for smaller pieces, using that walking foot works pretty well. So what you do is cut, like, I think she calls for about a 1/2 yard cut of everything. So 1/2 yard is going to be 18 inches by the width of the fabric, and quilting cotton is typically 44 to 45 inches wide. And I did it, well, that would be for a pair of mitts. So you need, left and right. What am I saying? For one single mitt, you don't need the 1/2 yard. You can like cut that in half, like basically into a fat quarter, which is essentially what I had used for this. But if I was going to do the entire, quilt an entire piece for both mitts, it would have been like twice as long. It would have been like a 1/2 yard cut. So by the time you're wrangling all that fabric in your machine, it's kind of a pain, which is why I did it one at a time, like 2 pieces for 1 mitt at a time. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, and then after that, all you have to do is cut out the oven mitt shape and sew them together. And there is a process for getting the bias tape on the bottom. And the inside is not finished, but you do trim it. Let's see if I can show you. Like, I don't know how I would have gotten this through a serger with the curve in the thumb and everything. So it's fine. There's just raw edges on the inside. And for the child size, you do the bias tape before you sew the entire mitt together, just because it's a small circumference and would be hard to put on the bias tape after the mitt is sewn together. I think for the adult size, you do it the other way. You sew the mitt, you get it all turned right side out, and then you put the bias tape on at the end. I could probably manage that with the child size. I'm not really sure. Anyway, yeah, so you're sewing through a lot of layers. So you have to make sure your machine can handle that and that you're not pulling anything too hard, because you might break a needle. I did not break a needle, but it's just something to watch out for. I did zigzag stitch to hold down the bias tape. Like you sew it on one layer on the outside and then you fold it in, and I use zigzag just to make sure everything caught. Yeah. For the banana mitts, I had enough bias tape to do a loop, so if they want to hang it up somewhere in their kitchen, they can. They won't be able to do that with the zebra mitts, but I think that's probably okay. Yeah, these were really fun to make. The one thing, going back to the whole process of like layering fabric and batting and more fabric and then quilting it, it's really important, like should you decide to make these, and if you don't have much experience with quilting, understand that when you stack all that stuff together and then you're stitching quilting lines, you need to make sure you leave a lot of extra around the edges. So I was just using the pattern to just kind of eyeball how big of a piece I needed. And I made sure that there was plenty of space around that pattern, because I knew that the fabric would pull in with the quilting lines. And also, even though try as I might, not to have things shift around, I also knew that I couldn't count on going all the way up to the edges to cut out the pattern pieces, because, not everything might line up. So you need to give yourself some extra room. But that means you end up with quite a lot of waste. I mean, this was worth saving, because I could probably make a small pot holder or coaster or something out of this. I just didn't feel right throwing it away. Same with the second piece of fabric I used in the zebra mitts. I can make maybe a little set of coasters or something to go with them. And I do have some of the banana fabric left too, but it makes me uncomfortable how much stuff around there is extra stuff extra fabric and batting from the edges that will probably get pitched because, you know, there's just, once scraps get small enough, it's just really hard to find a good use for them. And that bothers me a little. I don't really know how to be super efficient with this. That's okay. I'm not going to be mass producing these mitts, and you know, I've made these 2 and 2 pairs, and that's probably all I will do, honestly. Another thing to note is that I think the closer together you make quilting lines, like I said, the more potential you have for puckering, especially if you're quilting on the bias. Because in case you're not like a sewing person, woven fabric, you know, the threads go perpendicular to each other. And when you are sewing on the bias or cutting on the bias, that's where the fabric is the stretchiest. So you have to be really careful if you are sewing along a diagonal line, you know, diagonal to that grain, it's more likely to get stretched and warped out of shape. So anyway, if you have those stitching lines even closer together, I think, you know, the closer together your quilting lines are, probably the more that fabric will sort of pull in and contract. To be honest, the reason I made the lines further apart on the second pair was because I was losing patience. I just, you know, it takes a while to do all those sewing lines. I always do them in the same direction. That's another important thing. And I just thought, you know, if I make them a little farther apart, then it'll be fewer lines that I'll have to stitch ultimately. And I actually think that it pulled on the fabric less having them spaced out that way. So that's just something to keep in mind. It was a fun pattern. I do recommend it. So like I said, I will have the links below. But yeah, that was my little sewing adventure. The oven mitts arrived yesterday in the mail at my brother's house, and they are adorable. I told him and his wife that they could decide which pair belonged to which kid, and they said they're gonna have to share. We'll see how that goes. So anyway, I hope the banana and zebra mitts are a motivation for those girls to learn how to bake, if that's what they want to do. I do have another sewing project. This is not new, but I've been working on it. I finally picked it up to work on a little bit, so I just thought I'd show you. I don't know that you'll see progress from the last time. I've been working on this quilt. I shared the process. I think it was last July. I had like a real go. I work on this in fits and starts, and I was really going gangbusters on it last summer. So if you're not a longtime viewer, or if you don't remember, I have these 9-patch blocks from like more than 10 years ago that I put together, bought some coordinating fabric to go with, put it in a bag, and forgot about for literally years. Ran across it when I was doing some cleanup in my craft space last summer, and I decided to sew up a whole bunch of sort of improv tree blocks, like these triangle trees. I found a tutorial on YouTube, thanks to Susan B. Anderson. Her Instagram is so inspiring, all the different things she makes. So I just took the coordinating solids that I had found with the 9-patch and just used that as the basis for all these improv blocks, and used other scraps from my stash. So there's a whole lot of different fabrics here. Then I had to go to the quilt shop and buy more. This is how your quilting stash explodes, by the way. You never have just the right thing, and then nothing ever really gets used up. So I went and got some blue and green to coordinate, to put in between the blocks, and now it's kind of a bigger quilt than I intended. About a double size, I guess. I haven't measured exactly for sure, but, and it's not even like, is this the most beautiful quilt I could ever make? No, but it's fun and it's significant to me because it's been in my life for so long. So I want to get it done. So what I'm doing to quilt it, I don't have a machine that's appropriate for machine quilting. It just kind of can't handle all the fabric. So I am doing a combination of tying. I have knots at the tops of all these trees. I will trim these down eventually. This is just using crochet cotton. And then I'm hand stitching just inside all of the blue rectangles, and I will also do along these long lines for the green. So what I've been doing is I've had a little more time in the evening because I haven't had to do so much piano practicing. April was nuts. May it's going to ramp up again later, but I've had a little bit of a breather. So I've had some time in the evening to watch TV, and I've just been sitting and stitching, which is another reason I haven't done as much knitting. But anyway, what I'm using is this embroidery cotton? I don't know. This was recommended at Blue Bar Quilts, which is my local quilt shop that I love. So I got this to match the blue. I got a spool of the green to match the green. And the blue, I don't think I'm going to run out, but I can definitely see that I still have several of these. I've sort of started in the middle. I've been working my way out, and I've got all of these sort of most exterior of these blue rectangles to stitch up yet. So I may end up using like all of this. I'd rather not purchase more if I don't have to, but I guess I always could if they have it in stock. So anyway, so I've got that. I will do the green ones next. That's just gonna be like, it's these long running ones. So I'll just go, about a 1/4 inch in from the seam there. So that's my plan. And I had to go back and get needles. I think I talked about this before, but I asked them for needle recommendations because the one I had found was just the only needle I could find that I had that had an eye big enough to handle this cotton thread, which is a lot thicker than like regular quilting thread. The one I had was just a struggle to get through the fabric. So they recommended sashiko needles, which I have in the package, which is great. These are from Japan. They are very sharp because they are made for embroidery, but they are also made to accommodate thicker thread, like used in sashiko stitching. So they come in a few different lengths here, as you can see. But it's been really good. Also comes with a needle threader. I tell you, I don't know if you all have ever used a needle threader. Every single time I try to use one of these, I break it on the first try. Like those things are worthless. So I always I have a little thing of beeswax, and I run the thread over the beeswax, and then I have to wet the end in my mouth, and then I have to get it through the needle, and it takes a couple of tries, but there we go. Okay, so that's what I've been doing. That's it for the crafting. I will say that what I've been watching in the evening over the last week or so is the TV show called The Pit that's on HBO Max. It's gruesome because it's a hospital drama show. It's about an ER. And in fact, it stars Noah Wyle, who famously starred in the TV show ER 20 years ago or whatever it was, 25 years ago. But it's so well done. There's a huge cast, many storylines, and it takes place over the course of like a single shift. So each episode is an hour long, and it's, in real time, the hour of that shift. So episode 1 is from 7 to 8 in the morning. Episode 2 is from 8 to 9. But it just does such a good job of, I don't know what it's like to work in an ER, but I've heard that it does a better job depicting about what hospitals are actually like than most medical drama shows. It shows it gives you the sense of stress and overwhelm that everybody is feeling there. And they do a really good job of working in all the systemic issues we have in our healthcare system, like why people end up in the ER, why they are understaffed, just kind of the stress and fatigue that the employees feel, and like how they deal with it. You know, and there's like, they touch on all these different issues like insurance, accessing reproductive care. There's even a storyline about a caretaker who is so overwhelmed that she disappears for a few hours after she's, you know, brought this person she's caring for into the emergency room. So it's really good. And I have to say, this brings me to what I'm reading, because we're in a time where I feel like we're on the precipice of something terrible. And I'm not trying to be a doomsdayer here. I'm just trying to assess the reality of our situation. Like, I'm hearing that ports have no activity, so we're about to see empty shelves, catastrophic job loss, people are really unhappy. You know, there's wars breaking out. The president is saying crazy things every day. Like, it's just, and it's so frustrating because, like, what can we do about it? Like, we keep trying. I'm making my calls. People are protesting, but like, he's still in office. These chuckle fucks running the country are still in charge. Pardon my French. And so I think some people's natural reaction, like, I think people tend to have two different reactions when we know what's going on or are unsure what to do and feel a little bit overwhelmed and stressed by it. Some people, I think, turn to total escapism, like, just show me the pretty flowers and the cute animals and the nice crafts, and please don't bother me with what's happening in the world. And I am not judging that approach at all. That's what you have to do to cope. I get it. But then there are other people who kind of lean into the hard stuff because it's like the only way we can kind of feed the uncertainty and anxiety we're feeling is like, learn as much as we can about how bad it can get, just so like we feel prepared. Does it help? No, but still, that's what I am drawn to. So I'm drawn to that show. Don't watch it while you're trying to eat something. It is graphic, like medically graphic a lot of times, but it's good. And what I'm reading is, like, I'm reading heavy stuff too. Like, I wish I could get into something more escapist, but I'm not. So I just finished this book called We Do Not Part by Han King. She also wrote the book The Vegetarian, which I read recently, and I think I said a little bit about it, but not much. She won the Nobel Prize in Literature, and this is translated from Korean. So I think it was written 10 years ago or so, but translated more recently than that. And this is like the most haunting book I've ever read. And I'm not exaggerating. So it's gorgeous. It's stunning. It's very thought-provoking, but it's difficult. It's tough. And I learned about this whole huge incident in Korean history that I didn't know about. There was a horrible genocide, basically, of tens of thousands of people on Jeju Island off of South Korea in the late 1940s, and that was the precursor to the Korean War. I didn't know about that, and the United States was part of that. So this is about these two women who are, one of them is the descendant of survivors of that massacre, and the other one is her close friend. And I won't give away the plot for you, but they're both like grappling with that past and trying to deal with the memory of it. And it's dark. It's really dark, but it's also amazing. In the two books I've read by this author, I've noticed that she tends to write about women who experience great pain, who are starving themselves, and it's hard to understand exactly why, and who are very isolated. So if you're going to read it, know that going in. Finally, this book I'm not quite halfway through. This is called Memorial Days by Geraldine Brooks. She's also award-winning. Did she win a Pulitzer or something? Yes, she won a Pulitzer. She was a journalist before she was a novelist, but I haven't read any of her other work, but I've heard it's very good, and I'm definitely going to after this. This is a memoir. She lost her husband very suddenly on Memorial Day a few years ago. Like, he literally dropped dead of a heart attack in the street. And she was, you know, he was in a different city from her. So this is about the aftermath of that, and, you know, how she, you know, several years later went to a remote island and did a lot of writing and processing her grief, and just a lot about that event, and also like thinking back on her relationship and her marriage with him and their family. So it's not as, it's obviously about grief and the trauma of grief, but not in the same way as the other book I was just talking about. So I highly recommend it. Okay, that's all I have for you today. I guess I will see you next time. Bye-bye.